Hey, welcome to my channel. I'm the Roach Throshia, and this is a video that I have been needing to do for a few days. Today is the 14th of September. Um, I haven't done a video since the 11th, and the reason for that is because of 9/11, or at least part of the reason is because it was 9/11. So what I planned to do for the video and what I'm still going to do here in this video is kind of give my story as to how 9/11 worked for me and what 9/11 means to me or what it has become to me over the 20 years since it happened. When 9/11 happened, I was in Perth, Australia. Um, I was serving there as a missionary for my church. Um, we as young men go out on missions for 2 years to serve our church, which is all paid for by us because we have a lay ministry, which means that um, the ministers aren't actually paid for what they do. So I wasn't paid to go be a missionary. I actually paid for the experience of being able to go and be on a mission, or at least my parents covered me, which was very nice of them, and I'm very grateful that they were able to do that for me. I truly do appreciate it. But what happened is I went on my mission, and towards the end of it, uh, so I started my mission in '99, and I finished my mission in 2001. Uh, Came home. Um, I came home. I think it was in October of 2001. So I was getting pretty close to coming home when 9/11 happened. But we were, so me and my companion for my mission were in our flat. We had come back from our day's activities and we were in our flat. And we had basically a mother-in-law's suite that was completely separated from the main house, but shared a wall with the main house. So we shared a wall, but there was no doors or anything that would go between the two. So we had our own little place, but it was attached to the house of a member of the church. And they rented their mother in law suite basically as a missionary flat. And so we were there in that missionary flat on 9/11, and we had come home from our day. At first, I thought that I was thinking for some reason that this was in the morning when it happened, but it would have had to have been at night because 9/11 happened. So the towers actually got hit somewhere around 9 o'clock on September 11th, 2001. And uh, at 9 o'clock New York time, that would have been 9 p.m. Perth, Australia time. So exactly a 12-hour time difference. Um, and so at that time, it would have been about 9 o'clock when um, we found out about it. It was probably been a bit after that, probably somewhere almost towards 10, probably, that we actually got the first notification that it had happened. Um, or either that or we didn't hear until the next morning, which could have been possible because it could have been just a little bit too late for anybody to really know what was going on. And maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what it was. It wasn't until the 12th that I actually found out about it. Um, and that would have just been because we were, well, no, because all the reporting was like it was happening in real time and the second tower. So it's been 20 years. So obviously it's going to be a little bit here and there in my memory. But in any case, I'm pretty sure that it was actually that night that we first heard about it. And um, So what happened is we were there in our flat. We were, I would assume, settling in for the evening. Um, and a member came over. The member that lived next to us came over and said, "The trade towers, the trade tower has been hit with an airplane." And I had no idea what that meant. I had never been to New York. I didn't really know the trade towers from anything else. And so I went over and I went to me and my companion went over into their house. We didn't have a TV in our flat, so we went over to their house and or into their part of the house basically. So we'd had to go out of our door and over into theirs, and they had a TV on, and they showed us, and we watched the footage. I think we watched some more footage the next morning, and maybe that's why I get it confused. But um, so we went over, we watched the as it happened. And that's the thing. I think I remember when the second plane hit, and they actually showed the video of the second plane hitting the tower. Um, and that's the memory that ties it and makes me say that it was probably that evening that we saw the first footage of it, and then it was the next morning we watched more of the footage and more of what was going on with it. I'm kind of thinking now, the more that I'm thinking about it, that the more that that's the way I think that it happened. But I can't be 100% sure as to what happened. I do know that I still remember um, the original footage of that second plane flying into that building. Um, and it was played so many times after that that it kind of got ingrained in your mind. So I was quite a ways away from 9/11 when it happened. So it was kind of a surprise thing. Um, and it was also something that seemed half a world away, because in actual fact, for me, it was half a world away. Even though a lot of the people that I care about were closer to it, because I'm from Utah, so I am from the United States, and all of my family and friends were in the United States, or at least most of them. Had some friends in Australia, but some most most all of my friends and all of my family were in the United States or somewhere close to the United States. So, but they were all in Utah or somewhere else around Utah. They weren't over in New York or anywhere on the East Coast. So I didn't have a whole lot of concern because I knew that they were all safe. But then, too, it still was quite the feeling, quite the surreal feeling, because it was um, Americans that were losing their lives to what was happening on this. So it didn't feel like it was all that real to me at that point. And that might be part of the reason that later I actually did doubt whether the uh the events of 9/11 happened as they were, such as I doubted that it was actually planes that flew into the towers. I doubted that the buildings collapsed on their own rather than being um, done demolition style by the base being blown out from underneath it. I doubted. Um, I doubted just a few of the little intricacies. Maybe it was a plot for our government to try and get into Afghanistan so that we could start a war with Afghanistan. I had some doubts. I had some conspiracies that I was actually looking at, and I was actually saying, "Hey, maybe these have some merit." This happened like 10 years later that I was actually delving into these conspiracy theories and kind of getting partially persuaded by these conspiracy theories. Um, but then something pulled me out. of those conspiracies and made me dismiss all those conspiracy theories. And it was Flight 93. Flight 93 was what made me dismiss all of these conspiracies. So there was actually 4 planes hijacked on 9/11. And Flight 93 was different than the others. So it was um, it was probably meant to fly towards DC, or at least that's what they suspect. But anyways, what happened is the passengers on Flight 93, the hijackers actually took control of the plane, and they were redirecting the plane to somewhere else, somewhere back towards the East Coast, um, where it had left the. I believe it had left the. Yeah, it had left Newark. That's New Jersey, and so it had left Newark and was flying out. In fact, let's see, it was going from Newark. Um, oh, it was bound for San Francisco, so it was supposed to be flying across the country. But it got hijacked and got turned around and was flying back towards the East Coast. So back towards New York, back towards um, the DC in that area. Um, so the hijackers took it over, and then the passengers started sneaking phone calls to loved ones and other people. And they got the message that other planes had been hijacked and that planes had been flown into the Trade Center. And because they got this information, or wait, yeah, I think they did get some information that it was hijacked. I don't know as if they got the full information, but the passengers, in any case, for some reason, or maybe they thought they were the only one, or maybe they knew that um, they weren't the only one. In any case, either way, they decided to try and take the plane back. And they must have been at least somewhat successful in doing so, because the hijackers were forced to crash the plane before. Either the hijackers or the um, or the other passengers were forced to crash the plane where it wouldn't do damage. It wouldn't cause additional lives. Like everybody on the plane, of course, died, but it didn't cause any additional lives on the ground. Um, and so to say that these planes weren't hijacked or these planes didn't fly into the trade centers, or to contemplate that these heroes didn't actually fight back against the hijackers and this plane didn't go down in Pennsylvania away from where it needed to be, and those phone calls weren't made out to family members and friends saying that they were hijacked and saying that they were going to try and take the plane back, that um, that uh, they didn't think that they were going to make it back, and basically saying their goodbyes to their family and friends. If that would all have to be false, that would all have to be um, manipulated or basically made up. And then and then the fact is that those people in that plane did go down, they did crash, they did all die. So these are all facts that just were incongruent with any of this being a plot by our government to get into Afghanistan, by this being that the planes didn't fly into the trade towers. That so Flight 93 convinced me once again, because I was already convinced at the first time that it wasn't um, a conspiracy of any kind. Well, I was reconvinced that this was not a conspiracy, that 9/11 did happen, and it did happen by the hands of terrorists that took over planes, hijacked those planes, and then flew those planes into the um, trade towers as well as into the Pentagon. And the fourth plane, destination unknown, or hijacker destination unknown, that crashed in Pennsylvania. These four planes were actually hijacked by terrorists. They were used as weapons of mass destruction. And that I can't deny anymore because of Flight 93. Flight 93 is what brought me there. However, that opinion has been strengthened as well, especially and that's one of the things that I'm glad that I waited a couple of days before I presented this video, because I went back and kind of check the timeline to kind of refresh myself on it. And when I did that this morning. I thought that I could just hurry and quick and refresh myself on the timeline and then put this video out. But what I found is that this timeline sucked me in, and I had to go through the whole entire timeline and go through it all again. And I learned so much more about what happened that day. Because up to today, I knew a lot of things about it. I knew about Flight 93. I had actually looked into Flight 93 and found out that there was a museum, that they had parts of the plane, that they had transcripts of people's calls to family members and friends, what they were saying goodbye, that they claimed that the plane was hijacked, that they even said that we're going to try and take the plane back. So Flight 93, I already knew a fair bit about it, but I didn't know an awful lot about other things and other events that happened that day. So I kind of want to go through a few of them and just talk to you guys about them. So at 5:45 a.m. on September 11th, 2001, that's when 9/11 basically started, because some of the hijackers passed through the screening and got onto planes at that point. Um, so there was also an election going on that day. I did not know that there was an election going on that day, but New York was having a primary election that day in New York City. It was a Democratic primary. I don't think that really has any relevance whatsoever. I don't think that they really knew or cared that that was happening, but apparently it was happening, and it's pretty irrelevant to anything that we need to discuss. But the hijackers got on planes in Portland. Or total of 19 terrorists will hijack 4 California-bound commercial airplanes. In Portland, Maine. In Portland, Maine, they passed through the security in Portland, Maine, and got on airplanes to go to different places. So they went and got on and got on their planes, and they were flying, and they flew out. And so there was four flights these hijackers entered: Flight 11, Flight 175, Flight 77, and Flight 93. So the first one that got boarded and took off was Flight 11, and then Flight 175. These were the two planes destined to crash into the Twin Towers, the Trade Center towers. Um, and these were also the biggest and the fullest. I'm pretty sure they were the biggest planes that were hijacked that day. They were both quite big commercial airliners. The Flight 77 and the Flight 93, yeah, they are smaller. They were smaller planes. Not way smaller, but they were smaller in size. Now, these planes were all American. Oh no, there was American Airlines, United Airlines, American Airlines, and United Airlines. So two United and two American Airlines airplanes. And so they got in these planes and they flew them into the trade center, and the trade centers crumbled, fell, crashed. Now we so even on flight 11, which was the first to take off, this was found the crew. There was crew members that called in and said that their plane was hijacked, even from that very first flight. And so even people on that airline called in, and they've got transcripts of these people having called in. They've got recordings of these people having called in and said, "Hey, our plane has been hijacked." That is some pretty good evidence that this was no joke. This was no conspiracy of any sort. This was a terrorist attack on the United States. And I'm sure that there was more and even better evidence than what I'm presenting here. I'm just saying that there was enough evidence here that I'm presenting to convince me that this was legitimately a terrorist attack that just did not um, line up with what a conspiracy would have lined up surrounding the trade towers and 9/11. Um, well, and the other crashes as well, Pentagon and the crash in Pennsylvania, the Flight 93 that I talked about. There, there's just those events were so tragic and we have so much evidence that they did happen the way that um, the way that they were reported, that there's just no doubt in my mind that they really did report these as they were true, as they truly happened, and that there was no conspiracy behind it, other than a conspiracy among the terrorists to try and kill as many Americans as possible. At least that's more than likely what they were trying to do. Um, we won't know because they went and killed themselves with their acts on that day. Um, so there's no way that we can interrogate them and find out what their true motives were. But obviously, their motives were to kill people and to hurt people pretty badly and hurt America. Now, that's one of the places where they failed quite a bit, is hurting America, because if anything, it brought America closer together. It and maybe not right away. Well, right away, may have it brought us together a lot, really well. Um, just even me in Australia, I felt some camaraderie with the brave souls that fought against this, and with the Americans that were going to go out and find and punish those responsible for this attack. So, so even being all the way in Australia, I still felt more unity with my brothers and sisters in the United States through this. Um, and I know that all the people that actually lived through 9/11 have stories, probably even better stories than mine, of what happened and how it happened. And I know I was, like I said, I got sucked into my research on this, and I've seen the stories in it. So, anyways, so there were flight attendants that actually called in from Flight 11, which was the first one hijacked and the first one to fly into the North Trade Tower in New York. So it was the first one crashed, as well as the first one hijacked. And there was flight crew members that called in, said they were hijacked, said that somebody had been stabbed, and on the airline, and it sounded like it was a passenger that had ended up getting stabbed. They suspect that it might have been a member of the a former member of the Israeli military that was stabbed on the flight, and maybe he recognized one of the hijackers as a wanted man or someone that was dangerous, um, and maybe disrupt their plans a little bit, or maybe he just tried to fight with them and tried to stop them from being able to hijack the plane when they went to try and do so. Um, but that was the reports from the flight attendants, and there's no reason to doubt those reports. Um, so so I was surprised because that's one of the things that I found out today. I was surprised that they even had phone calls coming from the the first flight, Flight 11, that said, "Hey, we've been hijacked, and um, yeah, these hijackers act like they're pretty serious about killing us all, pretty much." So then it went on, and Flight 175 that was hijacked. Flight 77 took off; it was hijacked. Um, so with flight and then with Flight 11, also, the hijacker himself messed up when he was trying to call the cockpit to um, to tell them to let him in, or he hit the wrong button. So he hit the wrong button. Well, so he was trying to communicate with the crew inside the cabin, and he pushed the wrong button, and he broadcasts not just to the people in the cabin, but also to or well, no, he didn't broadcast to the people in the cabin. Instead, he broadcast to the tower, I believe it was, um, or to traffic control, um, and therefore alerted the controllers, the people in the tower, that this plane was hijacked. So not only do we have it from the flight attendants who called in and said we've been hijacked, but we also have the hijacker, one of the hijackers himself, saying that this plane was hijacked. Um, and not only that, but I find it really disrespectful to claim that all of these people were liars and all of these people did not try and fight against this hijacking, did not try and do whatever they could to do the right thing. I find that really disrespectful to the dead, for one, and also disrespectful to those individuals in general. Um, their stories should be told. Their stories should be known. Um, but we won't ever know their full story because of this tragic incident where they were killed in these attacks. There's also many stories from people in the World Trade Centers. There's stories from people in the Pentagon that we just won't ever hear, and we won't hear them because those voices were silenced. Those voices were silenced, and they were silenced by terrorists, by a terrorist act. So this is going to be one of my longer videos on this channel, but I'll try and get moving through it a little bit quicker here. Anyway, the planes were hijacked. They were flown into the building. The buildings collapsed. um, and a lot of people died. But then too, there was many heroic stories told after in the aftermath, and there was many witnesses, recordings, and things that just show that this was an actual terrorist attack. This was a hijacking of planes, and those planes did fly into the building. And it was those planes flying into the buildings that caused the buildings to collapse, that they were not demolished by explosives, that they actually were demolished by the planes having crashed into them. And even shortly after 9/11, some of the reports that were coming in, and they had actually gone through and figured out why the buildings collapsed the way they did. And if you know anything about architecture, then you can kind of understand where they're coming from. So the planes came in and crashed into the trade towers. Well, the trade towers, their main core was in the middle, was a steel core that was the main support for the whole entire building. There was a steel structure in the center of the building that was the main support for everything that was built around it. Um, there was some secondary supports, like say a stairwell here, a stairwell to, or something else there, like an elevator shaft, a stairwell, those kind of things. They would go all the way up through, and they were kind of additional supports, but they weren't the main support. The main support was the steel structure in the middle. Well, when the planes flew in with all this um, jet fuel on board and exploded, it created a massive amount of heat, tons and tons of heat. Um, and this lit on fire the very steel in the center of the building, as well as many floors of the building. So there was several floors that got demolished by these planes, and so then that center got superheated, heated up so much that it started weakening the steel, which was the main support for the building. Um, because the heat was very intense right there where the crash was, but the heat also would have expanded all through that center support down and up the building, weakening the entire center support. Once you've got that happening, there's a bobblehead on top of this, which is the top part of the building that wasn't damaged or destroyed um, by the plane coming in, but is now a huge weight hanging over the top of a the base of the building. So and so then you've got the two planes. The first plane hit the North Tower, and it hit it up higher than where the South Tower got hit. The second plane, it came in lower and hit lower on the South Tower. That left in the South Tower a larger and heavier bobblehead at the top of the building on a weakening stem in the middle. Well, once that stem got so weak that it started to fail and collapse, then you've got this big, huge weight that just comes crashing down and crushing the building below it. And with the South Tower, this meant total destruction of the building. This just totally wiped the building out. And why did it totally wipe the building out? Because um, all that weight, there was just so much weight coming down on the top of this building, and the center structure was already, the whole steel structure, the main support was all weakened because of that heat going into all that steel. And so it just completely crushed the South Tower. Well, the North Tower, and it crushed it faster. Like the South Tower actually collapsed um, with, I think it was within an hour of being hit, whereas the second tower, or the first tower that was hit, the second tower to collapse, the North Tower, So the South Tower collapsed, was hit second, but collapsed first. Um, and that happened. That happened fairly quick. So the South Tower was attacked at 9:03, and then I believe it was before 10 o'clock that it collapsed. So yeah, well, no, oh, just barely before 10 o'clock. So 9:59. So it had 56 minutes was how long it took before the South Tower collapsed. The South Tower, however, had been partially evacuated before it even got hit. And so there was far fewer people trapped in the South Tower. And we lost fewer people in the South Tower simply because of how much time there was time to get some people evacuated um, before it got hit. Um, so you can imagine all of the people in the top of that building would have been the most nervous, and so once they saw that other tower hit, you can imagine them being like, I don't want to stay up here. I know that I would be like, yeah, I'm getting out of this tower because this right now is dangerous. I don't think anybody could blame anybody for being all like, yep, getting out of the tower. That other tower got hit. I'm leaving. I'm gone. So some people had already evacuated it. Some people had already been moved down or moved themselves down. So yeah, we lost fewer people in the South Tower. However, there was still a lot of people lost. So just so you know, there was still a lot of people lost. Um, but then once the South Tower collapsed, then the North Tower collapsed a little while after that. And having been hit first, so it was 102 minutes before the North Tower collapsed. And anyway, so these center structures were melted, and then the tops just came down and crushed the bottom of these towers. And in the North Tower, because it had a smaller top, and because um, so yeah, because it had a smaller top, the plane had hit higher, so there was fewer floors and less weight up above it. Um, Even the people on the ground and bore witness that it seemed like it took a whole lot longer for that tower to actually come crashing down, to crash all the way down. And the fact of the matter is it just didn't have as much weight up above it. It also, um, and so it would have came down slower. Now it still was pretty fast. Still was pretty fast that it came down, but it came down slower than the other tower, and it didn't crush all of the tower quite as badly. It was almost completely demolished. However, there were a few parts, like there was a stairwell that survived it, and so it didn't crush it as badly. Well, yeah, but yeah, it's kind of comparing two different apples, basically, um, and saying one's sweeter than the other. There wasn't a huge amount of difference. It's just one didn't crush as badly. They were both pretty crushed, but one didn't crush quite as badly. Um, and so these buildings coming down will mark the U.S. much like Pearl Harbor did. And there's similar lessons to Pearl Harbor that the U.S. learned from this. So the U.S. has been a bit of the police of the world, or they've been accused of being the police of the world. That's not actually the goal of the US, and it shouldn't be the goal of the US. We should not be trying to police the world. What we should be trying to do is just getting everybody to play nice with everybody else. And the both Pearl Harbor and the Twin Towers are examples of everybody not playing nice with everybody else. Um so so yeah, and yeah, we have been pretty mean in order to tell people basically, yeah, if you're going to mess with us, if you're going to not be nice, then we're not going to be nice back. And we've been pretty mean and pretty strict and heavy handed when it comes to telling people that, hey, that's not cool. You shouldn't be doing that. Sometimes that's needed. I'm not sure if it always is, but I think that it is sometimes. And I think that in these cases that being heavy-handed would be the best option, um, because you're never going to be able to, if they think that they can come in and do that, do so much destruction to a country that's not really looking for a fight with them, then they really don't deserve a second chance. They don't, and even if we did give them a second chance, which maybe we should, the problem with giving them a second chance is that's more devastating than anything we want to ever see. And because it's so devastating, we need to fight against that. We need to keep that from happening. And so with Pearl Harbor, we learned that we couldn't just sit across the ocean and leave the European and Asian problems to the Europeans and the Asians, because eventually those problems will come after us. And then in 9/11, we learned that it doesn't take a country deciding that they don't like us and they want to hurt us. All it takes is a group of people with enough conviction and with a desire to harm as many people as they possibly can. And that's when we entered the war on terror. Now, the war on terror, I don't think that we should have been in Afghanistan for 20 years. I think that was longer than we should have done it, but I don't know who would have actually withdrawn the troops and done it properly. I know that Biden didn't do it properly. That's fairly obvious, and I think the whole world knows that. Um, but I don't know as if Bush or Obama could have done it better. Well, I think they could have done it better than Biden. I just don't know as if they could have done it well enough that there wouldn't have been problems in the future anyway. And we know that the way Biden did it, there was going to be problems in the future. However, I'm hoping that the good people that we do still have in our intelligence agencies will be able to gather the right information, be able to share the right information amongst themselves, amongst each other, to where they're able to stop any kind of 9/11 ever happening, because that's one of the problems with the 9/11 attack. It was actually pre- preventable. The people on the hijackers, a good portion of them had already been flagged as people that should not, um, had already been flagged as people that were being looked into or being watched by the FBI or other agencies. And so if that could have been put together with TSA information, or and also combined with information from other agencies, then 9/11 could have been stopped, because they had enough information, they had enough background on these hijackers that they would have known that if they're all trying to get on to planes at around the same time, or on the same day, same morning even, that there is something afoot, and that this needs to be thwarted. So then the TSA could have denied them access to the planes, or um, who knows what we could have done. But we probably would have been able to stop 9/11 from happening had we just had our agencies, our intelligence agencies, sharing information among each other and making sure that everything was kosher among them, that they actually knew who was who and where they were and why they were there, type of deal. But I wanted to share this video about 9/11 simply because I wanted to do something that would honor them, something that would show the respect, not for the hijackers, because I have no respect or and what they did has no honor in it. But I wanted to share honor and respect for the people that fought against it, as well as the people who fought to minimize the damage and to get people out of Manhattan and to do the right thing in some of the toughest circumstances that you could ever possibly imagine. So that's what the purpose of this video was, and I think I do want to mention the boat evacuation from the island. Those people are also heroes that brought their boats to evacuate people, even though they had no real reason or no real um, requirement that they would have had to have offered up their boat or offered up their services or helped out at all. When the call came out, a lot of New Yorkers with boats went and helped evacuate from certain parts of the island that the people weren't able to get to bridges or weren't able to get another way off of the island. There were some people that evacuated the island across the bridges, just walking across the bridges. But there was also a good number of people that just weren't able to access those bridges. I mean, there's an awful lot of people in Manhattan and so are on the Manhattan Island. And so there would have been a lot of people that would have needed to be evacuated from that island. And it would, like, we're talking over 1 million people, I'm sure, easily over 1 million people that would have had to have been evacuated from the island. So I know that I'm late, but I'm putting this memorial out there for those people in honor and in respect for them. I was hoping to get this video done and out a few days ago, but I'm glad I waited because I was able to learn and research so much more about it and hear so many more stories about what happened, and it just solidifies so much more um, that the reporting was done right on this. That this wasn't any kind of conspiracy, and there was no kind of conspiracy attached to it, other than the conspiracy of the terrorists, of the actual hijackers, and the organization that they were in. So if you ever doubt it, by all means, look into the evidence. Look at what the evidence is. Make sure you check into what happened, when it happened, how it happened. But that's all I have for tonight. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, comment down below. That just helps me be able to get my messages out to more people. So yes, I am the Roach with Roachia, and I will see you in the next one.